Monsieur FOLLOROU.
Peut-être devrais-je commencer par les questions qui...
Perhaps I should start with those questions that tried to see all these issues in perspective. I'm going to concentrate on the French element, but I think that will link up to other concerns in other countries. We get the impression that the surveillance technology revolution since 9/11 flows from the emergence of the internet, first of all, and then something that's not mentioned quite so often in public, namely the way the security services were terrified by the fact that encryption was coming into public domain. They used to laugh at the time saying that if cryptology was available to everyone, they might as well make the security services redundant. For a number of years, there was very strong lobbying in parliaments and governments to delay the availability of encryption to the public as long as possible. Now, in France, because of the technological revolution and the large scale of interception and data storage, surveillance has become an issue of sovereignty. What's at stake for the French services is to make sure that they can be independent. The French authorities, they feel, have to be able to form a judgment which will not hinge on information from other friendly countries, allies. Who's being targeted? What can you do with the metadata which is being gathered on a massive scale in France too? Well, it's everybody, really. The metadata... Alan Rusbridger mentioned the point that people are playing down the importance of this, but for the security services today, metadata is actually more important than phone tapping. People tend not to say an awful lot on the phone these days, but on the other hand, thanks to all this metadata, you can reconstruct quite a lot of the details of people's personal lives. Who do they consult? Where do they go? How often? So today, you can put together all the pieces of an individual's whole life. And when the French security services in the technical departments request information, what they start with is the name of an individual or a company or an address. The DGSE gets its supercomputers working on the case, comes up with some raw information, the metadata, covering a predefined period. And the agency then doesn't give the French counter-espionage or customs service, whoever it may be, the raw information. Rather, the DGSE provides some added value by making it possible to make sense of this metadata. That information, that added value, is handed over to French services who are subject to French legislation. As for the targets, it's true that in certain instances you might have terrorist suspects, but during the course of our investigations we were told more than once that inquiries were also carried out by the Interior Ministry's surveillance staff into people they thought might pose a threat to the head of state. That could be anyone. If they see there's a potential threat, they carry out investigations into that person. It might be a lawyer, it might be a journalist, or a politician, an elected member, an MEP. It makes no difference to them. If they think there's a risk to national security there, the operation will go ahead. This is a fairly wide-ranging justification, which is often employed, and the investigation will carry out without any monitoring body having anything to say in the matter. Now, what's the position of the people in charge of these services? Well, they talk in terms of the national interest, defending the French Republic and its institutions. Well, again, the question arises: what sort of illegal world are we talking about here? One of the heads of one of the surveillance services says what they're doing is not illegal as such. They're saying it's outside the law. That there are various means that are used that are not covered by legislation. On any number of occasions, that you hear them saying, "Well, one day we'll come before a judge." That may scare some, but they work with that idea in mind. The judge is out of the picture in their world. Their bosses have done everything they can of these to make sure that the judges keep their noses out of the surveillance sphere. Now, then we talk about permeability, the issue of sharing of massive data on an indiscriminate basis. France wants to be on the same footing as other countries in the fight against terrorism. It wants equally effective and powerful tools to what its neighbours have. So the material which is stored and scrutinised by these agencies comes under police authorities. There's one that works on international networks, working outside France despite being based here, and that there are direct links amongst the heads of services and the DGSE and their technical services, so that they can obtain information on people who might travel from France elsewhere and return. Then the information that is obtained by the surveillance services is dressed up in legalese. In the documents they may say, on the basis of anonymous information. They find ways and means of concealing the actual origins of the information which is fed into legal proceedings. And that may give rise to a number of legal concerns. Clearly, this intelligence was not obtained on the basis of traditional comparison of the positions of the prosecution and the defence, as you find in the traditional conception of legal proceedings. Mass surveillance, of course, was increased as a result of 9/11. That provided a real political justification for the setting up of all the technological systems. In France, there was a hearing before the Senate at which the former head of the DGSE stated in public that there was a shared database to which the heads of the main Western intelligence services had access. This is to deal with terrorism, and everybody shares in this pool. There are very specific requests between the US and France. They can ask for a month's data. You get electronic signals that have been intercepted in a given area, but also electronic signals from France to the Sahel region or in the opposite direction. So you end up with a huge body of information which is being transmitted by the French surveillance agencies to their American counterparts without any democratic scrutiny. I don't want to drag this out, but anyway, on the idea of early warning, I don't think we've focused on this yet, but Edward Snowden's approach and the approach of WikiLeaks are very different. The media, the papers, have published material in a responsible way. There isn't total transparency here. They're not just churning out absolutely everything in public in an indiscriminate fashion. So, as things stand today, well, I don't know if this will be borne out in reality, but as we see it, this approach does provide legitimacy for all these revelations. It's opened up the debate on individual liberty. I think Edward Snowden is a credible figure. If people argue he was in Hong Kong and then he sought refuge in Russia, well, Hong Kong was precisely a location where he had a degree of freedom which allowed him to get in touch with Greenwald and others. As for Russia, it's not the country he would have chosen in an ideal situation, but it's the country that offered him refuge. On the point regarding press freedom, obviously there is a potential threat here hanging over the media. Given the extent of surveillance systems set up in France and elsewhere, particularly in the United States, it seems clear to me that we're only at the very beginnings of our understanding of the system of interception and intrusion. Obviously, the main countries involved haven't confined themselves to using these electronic instruments purely to fight terrorism. This has been used in economic warfare and many other areas. Over the coming years, the press will continue to do their job. I believe that all countries, even those where journalists enjoy a reasonable degree of protection, and this would include France, journalists are going to come under increasing pressure. First of all, they will be intimidated. Thereafter, they might be taken to court. I think it's going to be a tough time for journalists in the years to come.
Vous remercions, Monsieur FOLLOROU.